and certified urban forestry professional, IN-3243B, with the International Society of Arboriculture. He has a BS in forestry from Purdue University, go Boilermakers, and he currently resides in Fountain City with his wife, his 2 daughters, Eleanor and Amelia, and his chickens. Okay, Kasey, important question. Can you get me the hookup on some eggs? Because the price of those are out the roof. Just say. Okay, we'll talk later. Okay, enjoy. Welcome, Kasey.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Can everybody hear me all right? I hope so, because I'm going to walk around great. That's bad news, because I just spent the entire week home with my kids, and now I get another 2 days next week. So, my goal is to sell you this bumper sticker. So that's what I'm going to do for the next 15 minutes. Make sure I know how to use this correctly. All right, so why trees? I always like to bring up this slide because I think it's important, and I think many of our speakers have already honed in on this. They provide a vast array of different amenities for the community. What we're here talking about today is obviously about the heat island and how they abate heat. My thing I want you to think about is the fact that the trees we have, or the trees we own, or the trees that we plant aren't necessarily only going to make amenities just for us. It could be for our neighbors, could be somebody down the street, all right? These amenities that trees provide, the other thing is they get better with time, with age, with size, all right? So, with that, I have a couple questions. What is the average length of home ownership? And you're probably like, what? I thought we were talking about trees. 5, 6. It is about 13 years, at least from what the Google told me this week. And the reason I bring that up, we own, on average, the trees that we plant for about 13 years, right? Now, thinking about those amenities that we get from trees, we get better with time, right? We may not necessarily be owning these trees for when they're actually going to be benefiting us. Another dilemma that we have. What is the percentage of home ownership in Knoxville? 42. The Google told me again that 46% of people actually own homes. That means almost 55% of the people in our community don't even own the trees that they may be getting the amenities from. So here it is. The 3 simple goals. We developed this tree master plan, urban forest master plan, in 2024. These are we went through a whole year-long process, and these are the 3 things we came up with. And we put it onto a bumper sticker. And you're all going to take one, and you're all going to go put it on your car, or your neighbor's car, and we're all going to. My idea here today is to call people up and give you some simple solutions to help us out as we can move forward with this master plan. So, more trees. When is the best time to plant the tree?
20 years ago.
20 years ago, all right, yes. You guys have heard it before, right? When is the second best time?
Today.
Now, yes. All right, what about this one? When's the best time to preserve a tree? 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it's the same answer. It's second best time now, right? I bring this up because we oftentimes think about planting trees, and that's going to be our solution in order to increase these amenities and these benefits we get from trees. We're not going to be able to plant our way out of this. We need to think about preservation as well, and we sometimes overthink this idea. All right, here we go. So what do we see here? This is a neighborhood that I purchased my first house here in Knoxville, Tennessee. Glen May Drive. This is my house that I lived at for 4 years when I first got here. Again, I did not own my trees for that long of a time. I want to point out a couple things and some simple things that I did while I owned this house. I planted some trees, a cedar, an oak. I also preserved some trees. I think that's tulip poplar. That was the red maple. A couple Leland cypress. Now look at this. This is my house. There it is. $40 of mulch and a couple free seedlings from Trees Knoxville, and that's what you get. Not overly complicated, right? Now, thank you. Who said so? See, looks like some of the neighbors there. Right. I'm not the only one. Look it. And the other thing I wanted to point out about this is sometimes just leaving things go, the amenities and benefits we get from that sort of thing. As you see in this residential neighborhood, and we see this all across Knoxville, once an area is developed, people want trees, they want a landscape, and then in time those amenities start to come back. All right, I mentioned this before, we tend to overcomplicate tree planting sometimes. For one, first and foremost, tree planting is supposed to be fun, right? It is a lot of fun. If you haven't done a volunteer event with Trees Knoxville, I really encourage you to go out there. It's companionship, it's fun. Number two, sometimes we get wrapped up in having to have a large tree or mature tree or whatever it is, and you want to spend $150. It's a very simple thing. For $1 a piece, you could probably purchase a seedling, or for free, get one from Trees Knoxville. I like to tell this story about my friend Matt. Matt and me worked at Davie Resource Group together. He used to propagate trees. Everywhere we'd go, we would do tree inventory work. He would collect the seeds, and he'd plant them, and he'd put them in these containers. And I asked him, I was like, what do you do with all those trees? He said, well, I give some away, and I plant them. I said, you plant them? Like for your neighbors and stuff? He's like, well, kind of. Like, sometimes they don't know I plant them for them. And I was like, so you just go around just planting trees? He's like, oh yeah, I got a couple of rules. Like, right tree, right location, and it's got to be somewhere where I think it's going to survive, you know? And so he's like a squirrel. He just goes around randomly putting trees in the ground. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. So I kind of started thinking about it, like, before I start telling people in this room, like, go out there and go plant a tree in your neighbor's yard. I was like, I wonder if people have ever been arrested for planting trees in someone else's property before. So I checked the Google and it's happened before. This guy in Hawaii planted 165 kiki coconut palm trees on this state recreation area and got arrested. So I started thinking, like, well, maybe just one tree, maybe not 165 trees, right? But it could be fun too. So like another idea I started thinking about this, like, you know, people like TPing or rolling someone's house with toilet paper, you know, instead of doing that, maybe we should, you know, it's $100 for a roll of toilet paper anymore. So like, you go buy yourself a bunch of seedlings and go stick them all over your neighbor's yard. When they wake up and they have a forest sitting out there when they wake up. When was the last time you planted or kept a tree for someone else? More than likely, if you've ever planted a tree, you've done that before. Here's a crepe myrtle tree from one of the homes I've lived at. This is a Atlas cedar. Someone planted that on Emerald Boulevard. I don't know, so maybe somebody in this room knows who did it. I went by there. I was like, well, who planted that tree there? I let it go. It's beautiful now. It's starting to grow. And then we have a lot of volunteer events where people like Trees Knoxville, where they plant trees for other folks. All right, now on to our next thing, better trees. All right, back to my house on Glen May Drive. So, what do we got here? Pear tree. Now before, anybody like pear trees?
No.
It's a Bradford pear, yeah. Does anybody like? Okay. All right. That's what I did to my Bradford pear tree. So I cut it down. I begged my wife to let me do it while it was flowering so I could send the message to the neighbors. And she would have let me. I planted this oak tree. And Jason, I don't know if you still live in the neighborhood. Is the oak tree still there? Okay, well, let me know if you go. It was there last year when I checked. There's the oak tree. It's still going. So for tree giveaway, that's what the neighbors get. The next homeowners got, and there it is. So.
How many years between the two slides?
Oh, that tree right there. That's like 5 years old.
Not bad.
So maybe 6. All right, what about the Atlas cedar, or excuse me, the incense cedar? That one I showed you I planted. Well, I bring this up, but this is my example for better trees. Here it is, right next to the air conditioner, right? Well, when I sold the house, I asked if I could dig it up and take it with me. Somebody gave me this tree. Actually, one of the residents here in Knoxville gave it to me. And I was just seeing how it was going, and I was going to move it somewhere else. And I asked for it. The homeowner said, no, all landscaping must stay with the house. I said, fine. That's the size that tree's going to get. I don't know if that thing's still there, but I guarantee you if it is, one way or the other, they still have an air conditioner right there. So I bring this up about better trees as well. Sometimes we're just always thinking about, like, it's not the pear tree, replacing it with another type of tree. There's a lot of different things that go into better trees. So here's my first home I ever bought in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And that there is an ash tree. And in 2008, emerald ash borer started coming into our community. We had it here in Knoxville as well, but it was really impactful in Fort Wayne, Indiana. This is what 30% of all our street trees looked like. 30% of our entire population in Fort Wayne, Indiana was ash. We lost 30% of all our trees within a 5-year period, other than a couple that were being treated. This little bug right there. I bring that up because, again, it's not just about putting one better tree in there. There's a lot of different things that go involved with this. So example here, all types of different trees. Diversification, that's very, very important when we think about our efforts. Talking about right tree, right place. Not sticking large trees underneath power lines. I was talking to a couple of people about that over lunch. Tree topping, the maintenance of trees. Making sure we're not improperly mulching trees. Thinking about the green spaces of which these trees provide. Trying to improve those areas as well. Making sure we plant the trees at the right depth as well. Better trees. All right, trees for all. We're on our last one here. All right, what do we got over here? What's that?
Just farmland.
Farmland, yeah. That's where I was born. Right there. That's where I live. Hessen Castle, Indiana. Right outside of Fort Wayne. I say this, and I like that our speaker, one speaker this morning, talked about the story about the council member and their dad and their first beer and what that meant to them. Well, believe it or not, I have a little area here that meant a lot to me as well. So this is the interstate that got built right around 1990. And this area right here became an early successional forest. Essentially, hawthorns, cedars, things like that started kind of coming up. Well, I'm one of 6 kids, all right? I have all sisters. I spent a lot of time outside. This was like my getaway. So this little area here, I spent years just out there messing around, playing all kinds of things and getting myself into trouble. I also like to point this out that here's another ash tree. All gone. I went back and I replanted a catalpa. My sister owns this house now. And I like to bring this up because thinking about going back to our previous slide, where you never would thought that somebody that grew up in this farmland right here find their way in their career of forestry, right? Here I am. I also like this story. Tom, you might remember this. So, Trees for All. So, one of the first plantings that we did at Trees Knoxville was in the Park Ridge neighborhood. And I always go out ahead of time and I look at the spots and say, okay, where can we get the right tree, right place, all that sort of thing. I came up to this house and it seemed like, well, this is going to be some really rough soil. I don't think it's going to work out. I went and did some back homework and it was just full of gravel. I don't know exactly if it's utilities or what. So we skipped that spot and we moved on. Well, when we started planting, we had one gentleman came out and they didn't want a tree, and we try and respect that. So we had an extra tree. We get down, and this individual comes out, and Miss Ann says, "Why didn't I get a tree?" So, well, the soil's kind of rough out here. And she said, I really want a tree. Okay, we'll put a tree in there. So I changed some things around. We got a Kentucky. I was like, what's going to survive in that? It's like Kentucky coffee tree. Let's find a Kentucky coffee tree. the volunteers hated us for this. They had to dig a hole in this gravel, and they were all sitting there like, this is not going to work out. Miss Ann, by the way, she was so thankful. She was giving everybody hugs. She was so excited. There's that Kentucky coffee tree today. Still going, still going. I did not put this into my slide. It was actually there. I took a template, but I like it. The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing it. Walt Disney. So my whole point here is this is a treatment planner where we're using this tree for stormwater mitigation, trying to minimize the amount of wastewater that goes from our storm events. That's a very engineered process, lots of materials, a lot of logistics. It's great. This is a simple seedling to stick in the ground. Costs free from Trees Knoxville. They all do the same thing in different ways. And I think that's very, very important. So sometimes don't overcomplicate it. Try and make this manageable where we can meet these goals inside our urban forest master plan. That's all I have. I really hope that folks will grab one of these, stick them on your car, stick them on your neighbor's car. That's my mom. She's crazy. I showed up at her house, I think it was 4th of July last year, and she's got this googly eyes on her, weeping Norway spruce. So I like it. Anyways, I appreciate it. I really hope folks can get involved and get involved. If you're not looking for ways to get involved, get with Trees Knoxville. There's a lot of opportunity. They have these bumper stickers back at their table over there, so please grab one. And I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Kasey. That was a lot of fun. At this point, I would like to once again thank our presenting sponsors, City of Knoxville Office of Sustainability, Earthadelic, and TVA. We also want to thank our supporting sponsors, Carex Design Group, US Bank, Sesco Lighting, Waste Management, KUB, Cover Pro Roofing, Denart Construction, Brown Bag Catering, and K-Brew. Please join me in thanking them once again for their support of the summit. And at this time, I would like to bring up Josh Foreman from Earthadelic, and he is going to introduce our final speaker of the day. Thanks, Josh.
If I'd known I was going to be following the comedian of the day, I probably would have said something differently. But Kasey and I have known each other for about 13 years, and that's only about a quarter of his personality on display there. So, hi everybody, I'm Josh Foreman. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing at Earthadelic, and for the second time in a row, we are one of the presenting sponsors for today's Sustainability Summit. So, thank you. Earthadelic has partnered with Keep Knoxville Beautiful in a myriad of ways, including becoming the very first company in Knoxville to reach the gold status in their waste-wise recycling program. It's something we're really proud of. So whether we're building extensive outdoor living retreats or remodeling homes to bring clients' dreams to life, Earthadelic operates from the perspective that it's community first. And we can't think of a better organization to help us spread this philosophy than Keep Knoxville Beautiful. So I want to take this time to thank them for an amazing summit today. Lizzie and her team have done a great job, and it is my pleasure to conclude the day with a presentation from Miami-Dade County's first ever sustainability director. She's a founding member of the Southeast Florida Climate Change Compact, and since 2020, she's been with Jacobs working with local and state representatives, identifying risk and building resilience plans in policies and projects. Her efforts in emergency management have led FEMA to consult with her as an advisor in both Florida and Hawaii, and today she is here with us in Knoxville. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Susy Torriente.
I get to follow the speakers with all the energy. And I haven't had my Cuban coffee, so I will try to do my best. So, yeah, help me out. And just use the clicker. All right. So, no, use it the other way. Hi, everyone. So thanks again. What a wonderful event. Thank you so much, Lizzie, and for the board for inviting me to come to Knoxville. And I'll definitely be back because you have a beautiful downtown, and I definitely want to see more of it. So we're here today, obviously, for, it's hot. It's getting hotter. The extremes are there. And I think Pravina did an amazing job this morning sharing all the data, right? And I just looked up, a couple of things before, coming here, just doing my homework a little bit. And clearly, this is an issue that's really starting to affect, I think, every community, right? And so I think it's great that we're here today talking about doing something, because we can take this information and do nothing, or we could take this information and actually start to do something. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. Lizzie invited me to talk about the work that we're doing at Jacobs, but also to really kind of go back and think about the work that I've done in my career in local government in South Florida over 29 years. And so really the last half of my career has been focused on sustainability and resilience and in the planning space, really. I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, I'm an English major, I was telling somebody earlier, and a public administrator. And so I come to this from a very, very practical perspective. I surround myself with really smart people and then try to dumb things down to get somewhere, to get something done, Kasey, to your point, right? So what I'll talk today is a little bit about that, about the data, the impacts, understanding things, really finding the right leaders and putting plans together. And what I really like to talk about is how to modernize, the things that we're doing and the rules that we live by, especially in local government. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about my work in Miami Beach, and then I'm going to segue into a really exciting project, really a passion project for me while at Jacobs on Miami-Dade County Resilience Hubs. And then at the end, because I can't possibly talk for an hour, we're going to do a group exercise. I actually pulled out some worksheets from the Hub's guidebook so that we can work in our tables and try to imagine, if you will, creating a resilience hub in your neighborhood. So that'll be what we'll be talking about over the next few minutes, something like that. Definitely not hours. So like I said, the first step typically when you start to look at these issues, and whether you're creating a resilience plan, a heat strategy, you really start to look at the data. And the data is out there. It's really, at this point, it's not only out there and proven, we're out there and feeling it. And so typically you try to look at that data, but then understand the impact. And what does it do to your community? What does it do to your people, right? And then what are the kinds of things you can do about it? Many communities go ahead and create heat strategies, right? And more and more I'm seeing these all over the world, really. And typically these are led either by sustainability offices or resilience offices, but also there's a new trend in chief heat officer positions. And there are a few around the world, actually. This was actually something that came up through the Arch Rock Foundation, Adrian Arch Rockefeller Foundation, funding these positions and sort of seeding them in governments. And then the first person there on the slide is Jane Gilbert, who was a chief resilience officer in Miami when I was in Miami Beach, so we worked together quite a bit. And Eleni was also a chief resilience officer in Athens as part of 100 Resilient Cities. So these are leaders that are advising mayors, advising commissions, and really trying to put those plans and projects into action. And so what I wanted to just sort of touch upon too is that I think we talked about this already this morning. I think Drew gave a great overview of the products, right? And there's obviously products out there, they work. I think that what I want to mention is that in my experience in government, what I found was if you do just a one-off project, you're not making your city heat resilient, right? If you're just doing just one thing and it's one and done, it doesn't really work. It really works when you institutionalize it, when you create programs, and when you can make a real impact. The other thing I've actually seen is some of these products, when you put them in, if you don't train the staff, if you don't give them the skill set, if you don't help them understand how to change the way they operate and the way they maintain, these things will fail. And I've seen that. It's almost a bit of sabotage, because changing their operating mode may be a little different. So I would say that, along with any kind of new product, never forget the people aspect of it and training your staff. And again, other examples there. But what I really wanted to focus on is policies and standards, because I think that's where we can really, really make a difference. And we were chatting earlier today, someone, about how, again, we can have pilot projects, right? When I was in Fort Lauderdale, we did experiment quite a bit with different products and pilots and all that. Or you can create, nice worded documents in the city or county government that says, when feasible, right? Or please consider. Well, consider, done, move on. I'll do something else, right? So what I have found is the way to really do things is through creating policies and standards, standardizing, let's say the design guidelines for the playgrounds, standardizing the green building ordinances for buildings like that. The Paris Art Museum in Miami, a beautiful building right on Biscayne Bay that was designed really with the environment in mind. And then going back to people, because I always like to go back to that. There's the two things you're going to hear me kind of go back to is policy, but the people aspect of it. And I remember being in working in Miami Beach. I was an assistant city manager there, and working with the code department. I realized they were all wearing black uniforms, right? And maybe they'd wear shorts in the summer, but I was like, these people are going to die out there, So I worked with the team, and then worked with not only the leadership, but created like focus groups with the employees. They found their own. They redesigned their whole uniform, and they were happy and they looked better and they weren't as hot. And so then that started a trend with the other departments, So again, that, then really it's about also making sure that it gets into the personnel guidelines and it gets into any kind of union contract, things like that. So, get the program started, right? Maybe experiment a little bit, but institutionalize it through your rules. And so wanted to talk a little bit, again, because Lizzie asked me to kind of lean back and talk a little bit about my experience in government. And so I think that my best, probably most productive 4 years of my career were in Miami Beach, because the way I see it, the stars aligned. I came in as an assistant city manager, overseeing the planning departments. I had environmental, I had sustainability, transportation, mobility, things like that. Then there was another assistant manager that had all the engineering. So we had a very progressive city commission, a great leader in our mayor, and a city manager who just let staff, do the right thing. And I took advantage of those 4 years, to be perfectly honest with you. When the stars align like that, it's not often, let's say. And in those 4 years, we made about more than 10 amendments to our land use code to incorporate resilience and sustainability in a variety of different things. And obviously, being in an island community in Florida, a lot of the work was focused on obviously sea level rise, flooding, things like that. But we also created standards. One of the last ordinances that I worked on there was one for the urban heat island effect, and that's the one where it's was creating new standards and really saying any new construction in the city would have some sort of a cool roof, a green roof, some sort of metal roof, something to that effect. So it wasn't an option. It was really more of a this is the rule. And then, if you had to get out of it, there was kind of a bunch of different, steps you can take to get out. But that became the norm. And I think that's really what's important when you start to institutionalize. The other thing we did was change our processes. All the development, permitting, all that process has to go through different land use boards and planning boards. Well, we took our planning board and actually reshuffled it and made sure there was a water expert now. So not only did you have maybe like a neighborhood rep or an architect, maybe a landscape architect, but now you had somebody who understood water, whether it was an engineer or scientist, so that could be discussed at the policy level, and created a checklist for the staff and for the development community when they were turning in their permits, making sure that all these things were checked. So we looked at the system very holistically to make sure that it's not just a one-off program, it's not just a one-off project, but it was really institutionalized. And I can look back, I left 5 years ago now, and those things are still in place. And I think that's the beauty of it. So I would say what I learned there is make sure that when you have opportunities and you have the right leadership in place, take advantage of it and institutionalize it as much as possible. I did want to mention now and kind of like segue to a recent work that we finished at Jacobs just at the end of last year. And it goes back to a project that I started when I was in Miami. So when I was in Miami Beach, we were part of the Greater Miami and the Beaches Coalition of Miami, Miami-Dade, and Miami Beach. We became the first sort of trio organization to join 100 Resilient Cities. And as a part of that process over the 3 years, we created a resilient strategy for the county, Resilient 305. And one of the recommendations in Resilient 305, and I think I'm jumping ahead there. There it is. One of the recommendations in Resilient 305 was to create and stand up these resilience hubs. And resilience hubs, I think we've touched about it a little bit this morning, most of you probably know, but it's an actual physical place in a neighborhood that's altered to make sure that it serves the community's needs and their desires and what they need on a day-to-day basis. But the beauty of the hub is that it can also sort of turn on and off into like emergency mode. And so our project with Miami-Dade, it was grant funded. We had the opportunity of creating a resilience hub strategy for Miami-Dade County. Part of that was not only just the strategy, but creating a guidebook, and then doing a site selection for three sites in the county, and doing 3 master plans. And along with that, created a series of planning tools. And so the approach that we took, again, going back to people, is that it was the people first mentality approach, the way we did everything. Hubs are something that are just incredibly hyper-local, and every single one of them is different. One in Knoxville is not going to be the same as one in Little Havana in Miami, or even Little Haiti in Miami. So understanding that every community is different, honoring the community's history, that's how we really approach this. And we wanted to identify, because we had to take all Miami-Dade County, we wanted to then hone it down to 3 sites. We did a vulnerability assessment that what it did was looked at climate vulnerabilities, infrastructure vulnerabilities, and social, and layered that in order to do that. So that was that first piece of the vulnerability assessment, gathering all that data. But at the same time we were gathering data, we were having conversations. And so that engagement part was feeding the information in both ways, feeding both ways, so that we could get the analysis done. I'll sort of fast forward to show that this is the results of that analysis. We were able to map out the county, understand the climate vulnerabilities and the social vulnerabilities. We were able to cluster what those hot spots were, so we could narrow down from like 16 to 3. And then when that was that first level analysis, the second level analysis, if you will, was then within each area that's vulnerable, what's the least vulnerable site to put a hub. And so that's the process we went through because we were going, you know, such a large county and it was only 3 master plans. There's a variety of different ways of doing it, but it's good to have a nice, you know, a data set so that you're making sure that you're putting these things in places that are needed, but they're still also safe. We went through the process of, like I said, finding the right spots. We ended up determining 3 areas, and we wanted to make sure they were distinct, unique, geographically dispersed, so they wouldn't be all the same. So we found, the first was a church in Deep South Dade, which has a nice, a very rich kind of agricultural community, a lot of, a huge immigrant community as well. Moving up to sort of the center of Miami, think of Overtown, historically black neighborhood, and then going a little bit more northwest, I should say the one in the center of Miami, it's a county social services sort of community center. And then going a little further west in more of a residential area and in a city, we chose a neighborhood park. And so it's kind of 3 very distinct models that, you know, I'll kind of walk through how we got to the master plans. But as we were doing, you know, that site selection, there was also a team working on a series of tools. And those are the kind of example tools that you'll get to play with in a little bit. So you'll see how it can be used. The tools span everything from a menu of services for the hub, how to do site selection, how to figure out your governance, how to identify, you know, your network and your volunteers and all that. So we came up with about 9 to 10 different tools in this toolkit to stand up a hub. And like I said, this is going to be one of the worksheets that you'll work with a little later so that you can start to identify, you know, why do you want to open up a hub? You know, what are the needs of that community? You know, one community may have a large population of elderly, right? And there's going to be certain needs there. There might be another community maybe with a lot of kids at risk, right? What are the needs there? In any case, all the hubs are serving that hyper-local purpose, but then when it comes to an emergency, they're that front line of defense. So part of our exercise as well was working with the Office of Emergency Management to set up those protocols for emergency mode. And I love this slide because it builds on that foundation, right? What are the foundational elements you need from the beginning to start thinking about a hub? And you think about the people in your neighborhood, the services that they need, obviously a safe building that has good communications and operations. And for Miami-Dade, mobility was important to the community we were working with. You know, is there bus routes? Is there evacuation routes? Is there space for micro-mobility? Things like that. Like I said, those are a sample of the tools that we created, the service menu, how to phase in creating a hub, the different models to operate, and the governance models and things like that. And then, of course, that is the foundation that gets your hub and, you know, stood up and ready to go and serve. If you go to and I have a link to it at the end, but if you go to the website in Miami-Dade County, you'll be able to see all the work that was done and all the data that was collected. And so there's also a series of maps and things like that there. If, let's say you are a community-based organization in Miami, you are a leader, right, a trusted leader in your community, or you're a city employee, right, you can actually start to pull together that data and to help you fill in these forms. But I think that the forms and the process are the same. I think they can be easily kind of adjusted to whatever community, and then, you know, you fill it out with the data you know, or obviously with the information you know. And here's an example of one of the tools about the thinking about how to open up the hub. You know, let's face it, nothing's perfect, right? And you can't wait for perfection to open the doors and start serving. But you want to make sure that there's like a threshold is your building safe? Is there a minimum amount of services, right? Is it a healthy building, right? Are people going to come to the building? I think that's really important too. So there's a tool to help you with the threshold of what you need to open, but then how do you phase in and plan for that sort of optimal state a little later on? It could be 5-10 years. And then here's another tool, site selection. Once you have the neighborhood, right, and all that, how do you go about finding that right site, right? And so, like I said earlier, what we did was, within those clusters, start to map out what are the hub-like activities already taking place, right? Churches, schools, service providers, a city building, a library. Any of those could be, altered in a way to enhance the services in a community and to do hub-like services. Another tool is our site evaluation checklist, and this is a really actual popular one, and got a lot of attention because it was created by a couple of our engineers and architects, and it was created in mind that anybody could use it, but typically more think of like a facility manager, right? And let's say you have an existing, like I'll use my example in South Dade. It was a church, right? And so the church has had a lot of land, obviously a big sanctuary, and then some other space that wasn't quite programmed just yet. And so they were able to use that tool and figure out, is it how is the hub operating? What should it need? What kind of utilities, and are they safe? Again, what kind of protocols for communications are there? So that site evaluation checklist helps you understand, is it a site that the owner is willing to open up and be a partner? And to what was said earlier this morning, it's that whole level of trust. You don't want to create a building and and open the doors and all of a sudden nobody's showing up, right? Or you don't want, the reason these hubs work well in places all over the country, and the reason they work well in emergency mode is because people go to it on a day-to-day basis. That's where you feel comfortable. That's where you visit. That's where you maybe go after school, right? Or maybe you go and you get your booster shots, or it's some sort of a clinic. Any of those things, as long as it's already, it's a place of trust, and a good candidate site would be a willing owner. And then of course the other things are the more concrete things. The building site, is it safe? Is it connected? And again, are the utilities there? Another tool we came up with was every hub is different, and there's different models. And some will say that the best ones are the ones that are kind of just community led, let government get out of the way. But I think it could be both, right? You can have a model where it's entirely community run, and maybe government is there for some grants and some liaison work, maybe liaison to emergency operations. Another model is pure government run, and that's the way that Miami-Dade County wanted to do it, right, with their center and parks as well. But actually, it's not fair. The Miami-Dade County one is more of a hybrid, where it could be run by either the county or the CBO, but then there's opportunity for agreements and service agreements. So let's say that the county has a huge facility, but then somebody can come in 2 or 3, 4 times a week and provide a service, provide a class, provide something that, again, is based on what the community needs and wants. And then, of course, these operating modes, very similar to sort of like your phases of emergency management. Your hub would start in a normal mode, every day, functioning day to day, but thinking about resilience planning, thinking about hazard mitigation, right? Thinking about maybe building some capacity in the organization, in the neighborhood. It could then shift into emergency preparedness mode. like for us, it's hurricanes, or I guess here's tornadoes, like a big alert that I got on my phone last night. Kind of freaked me out, but so thank God I was at the hotel already. But yeah, for us, it's like, okay, you see the hurricane coming. You do have a little time to get ready. These could be the first line to get ready, to get organized, to give the community good information. After the storm goes, then you fall into like the response and recovery mode. And again, these could be the trusted spaces in your neighborhood, and they could be extensions then of emergency management. And I think it's really important to mention that all of this is going to require communications protocol beforehand, not during an event, not in the middle of the year. But I think a good practice would be before opening up a hub, really creating an emergency management plan, creating standard operating procedures, and knowing who's in charge of what and when. And again, creating that relationship and that liaison relationship with your emergency managers. So just going back to one of the steps in the methodology, again, leading with people, the engagement. We began it at the beginning and then went throughout. And the engagement began very much when we were doing the countywide assessment. We were talking to more like groups and leaders. Once we got into the neighborhoods, the engagement changed, and we were talking to, the pastors, the park rec leader, the people in the neighborhood, the advisory boards, right? Some of these organizations already have an existing advisory board. So what we did was, again, continue that engagement, but it went from like broader and at higher level to more obviously concentrated, closer. And that led to the co-creation, right, of these plans. We collected our data, we did our maps, we listened to the community priorities, and then mapped out these 3 master plans and documented it in the strategy and created the guidebook for with the steps, so you'll see. And then one of the other slides here is really just to show the relationship. There are so many good people in all the different pockets of a community doing good work, right? The work you do here, you could be part of a network of a hub, right? Depending, and you can be a resource to, from, give, take, all of that. So what we did here was try to just understand how we created our database, was like understanding the human aspect and the social infrastructure, understanding the surroundings, and then understanding all those infrastructure layers, and then mapping out that relationship to the community. So a hub could have a library, walking distance away, faith facilities, clinics, parks, schools. That's essentially part of that whole network. And like I mentioned, we created those three master plans for those 3 sites. And then, of course, leads us to the last step of implementation. Our project was completed. We created the strategy, the guidebook, the tools, the master plans, and delivered the website. And that's all available now. And now it's a matter of implementation. We created those roadmaps, and they're in different phases of continuing to do the good work that they were doing, but now they have the plans so they can continue looking for funds and making those improvements. And yeah, those are the different elements of implementation that we kind of teed them up as the last 3 months of the project. We were more in that sort of handoff mode when we were talking about, who's going to be that implementation task force when Jacobs leaves. Who's going to wake up every morning and think about this? What's going to be your funding and financing plan? How are you going to start thinking about retrofitting that building? Continuing to really build and strengthen relationships, of course, and continue to integrate with the county and with the emergency management teams. So with that, I wanted to say thank you for inviting me. And before we go into the worksheets, which are going to be passed out, The resources that I have listed there, the first one is from Miami Beach Rising Above, and that's on the Miami Beach's website. The Resilient Land Use and Development section there details like those 11 ordinances that were worked on. And so I think they're good kind of best practices, sample ordinances that could be looked at. We did a lot of research building it together. And again, I don't think it can be duplicated, but what I always found that, looking at other communities, I was inspired to create, what was best for my community. And then the story map with the Hub's website is the other resource there. So as we're giving out the worksheets, I do just kind of want to leave you with some final thoughts, if you will, based again on what I've seen in my career and just sort of these changing times is, be constantly aware of the conditions and the trends and what's going on so that you can be nimble and react to it. And a lot of times what I tell, kind of the younger folks that I work with, the young professionals, stay curious. Change happens when you're asking questions and you're staying on top of things and just be really curious. Don't just accept things as they are. Be willing to modernize those rules. Doing 11 amendments to the land use code wasn't easy, right? And we had to go through, a lot of stakeholder engagement, working through different committees, working through, briefing all the different commissioners. But at the end of the day, we institutionalized and modernized the work. And some of the ordinances that we updated were like from the 80s, so it was really about time. But if you don't get yourself into that process of doing it, it'll just sit there. And again, my motto is to make lasting change. It has to happen through policy. That's how you operationalize. That's how you institutionalize. Nothing makes me happier to look back and go to the websites in either Fort Lauderdale and Miami Beach and still see my fingerprints, So it's a good feeling. So with that, again, Lizzie, thank you. And now it's time for our exercise. So does everybody have a package? So what I'd like to do is, just work in your tables and start to think about how would you plan a hub. And so in the absence of the Miami-Dade website, which you don't need because it's just a lot of neighborhood data about Miami, sort of imagine if you had the data of a certain community, but also know your community. Where do you live? Where do you work? Where do you play? What does that neighborhood need? Pick your favorite neighborhood. Pick the neighborhood you grew up in, whichever. But start to think in a group and think about how would you start to plan your roadmap for your neighborhood hub. And, the whole, all the steps are there in the column, right? This is where you start. You start to plan that map. You want to understand your neighborhood, right? You want to think about what does your neighborhood feel like, look like, sound like? How do people communicate? What's the historical context, right? What makes it that neighborhood, right? Then start thinking about the requirements. What's good about the neighborhood, but what's missing, right? You're not going to do all of these, but the process then would be once you understand those vulnerabilities. In Miami-Dade, what we did was the vulnerabilities. Then we created the menu of services based on those